I don't know how that you can't avoid being involved in international. I've experienced some of the students here in the U.S. and sometimes they seem a little bit more sheltered, and that's probably a wrong attitude to take. Some are very adept at going abroad and learning new things, and most aren't. You know, they just I think they feel sort of inhibited about going into a different culture. So there's, from the U.S., it may be a little more difficult to find that type of mentality that's open to change, that's open to new cultures, new societies. That's kind of an interesting trait to have. For me, I came from a military family, so military families every 2 years would go from one coast to the other. You know, we were lucky to stay in one place 2 years. So although that was difficult for me going way back, but that probably allowed me to adapt to different changes, cultures, societies, and so forth. And you know, that's what I like doing now. I appreciate going abroad and learning new things. So I don't often see that in some of the students, that particular interest, but they should. Your customer is now global. It's not domestic. And it's even difficult to have a small company that's used to dealing domestic to open up and say, listen, your product is worldwide. You need to export. You need to expand your business model.
So you would recommend that American students should try to be open-minded and, you know, open for new things.
Yeah. You have to be open to change, and change is always difficult. At least I'd say for most students here and most people, change is very difficult to come by. If you can just open up to it, you know, you'll have the whole world to experience.
So what do you think about Germany being a partner in this exchange program, and what do you think about the possibilities or, you know, opportunities American students will be faced with in Germany?
You know, it's always good to get somebody else's perspective on how to do business, how to relate to one another. You know, that's exposure you can't buy. I really appreciate learning somebody else's culture, respecting it, learning how they do business can be, you know, enlightening. Good for you to learn it, especially if you're in a different country, and maybe the Germans are more successful at a particular country. They may come in and say, you know, we know how to do business here. I should be listening, you know, and picking up on the tips and the strategies on that. It's for the benefit of your own company. You know, if that's what your task is, to go out and get business, why wouldn't you be open to exchanging ideas and thoughts? And this is a good start, is to you know, learn from the German students and vice versa. Go to Germany, learn how they do business. It's very interesting. You may come out with a different way of doing things, something that's an aberration of the two, and it might work for you.
You would always prefer a student or a new employee who has international experience over someone who has not.
Yeah. That you know, that streamlines the whole process. It gives me an idea that you're already accustomed to change, to cultures, to looking for opportunities. I'm kind of an entrepreneur. I've started 5 or 6 companies myself, and you look at what the opportunities that they're presented, and somebody that's adept at change, at cultures and things like that can put things in better perspectives, and so you can reap great rewards out of that. It may not always be financial. It might be something that's not particularly tangible, except maybe to yourself. You know, maybe some ideas or thoughts. You know, given your exposure to that country and that culture. So.
Okay, so what do you think when it comes to language? do you think it is important to know multiple languages, or Americans they are able to talk in English.
Right.
English is like the major business language all over the globe. So how important is it for Americans or any student to know multiple languages?
It's really critical, and I'm somewhat embarrassed because when I was going to school, they kind of got rid of that particular aspect of learning a different language. And I thought that was really a poor way of doing things. I learned French. Oddly enough, everybody else knows Spanish, but I picked up on French. But I thought it was a bad message. And that was early on. I could see early on that this was the way to go. If you can speak a language or even attempt to speak the language, you're that much more appreciated. In doing business in China, I don't speak any of nothing. I mean, other than being very polite, but I can follow a conversation, whether it's an interpreter or what have you. I look at body language. I look at what's being said. I can interject, and they're wondering if I know the language or not, but I know what they're talking about, and I know when they're talking about it. And that comes from experience and exposure. That can go a long way. So it keeps them guessing because they think you know their language. So there are other ways to compensate, but I really do appreciate knowing the languages. And I've visited Holland and Belgium and France and so forth. I know Holland, what they have, like they're required 3 languages with 2 electives. And I'm going, that's amazing. I mean, I have trouble with French. So, that's one country that's very, used to doing international type of business. Germany, same thing, I would imagine. So I would say it's critical that you know some other language.
So maybe just to conclude, do you have any tips for German students coming to California? Things to be done, places to go to?
Well, I would say that we're not entirely cultureless in California, although it probably seems like that. I'd say we're a little bit laid back and so forth. But for a lot of the companies here, if you're willing to visit them, I think they'd be more than happy to walk you through and tell you a little bit about what it is that they do. Even as a private business entity, I'll be invited into a medical type company, maybe one that's just been started, and I'll be taken through the tour and call it the dog and pony show. But it provides some insight into how they do business and what they're looking to achieve out of their new operation. So why not get involved and knock on people's doors? I wouldn't be afraid to do it. I'd certainly try and access something that maybe pertains to your studies. So if it's MIS, I'd be knocking maybe on Qualcomm's door and say, listen, I'm a student. I'd like to learn a little bit more about what you do. Can I make an arrangement? So